You're surrounded by calm, the kind that feels like a hug you've been needing for a long time. The air around you is soft and still, like it's been waiting all day just to hold you. Somewhere in the distance, a slow breeze moves through tall grass, and the light? Oh, the light. It's gentle, golden, the last whisper of the sun before night fully arrives. You take a breath, slow, deep, and easy. Every sound you hear feels kind, like the world itself is exhaling with you. The weight you've been carrying quietly begins to loosen, as if invisible hands are untying every knot inside your chest. Here, nothing rushes. Here, you don't have to be strong or brave. You can just be. Wrapped in stillness, surrounded by calm. And for tonight, that's enough. You are safe. You are seen. You can rest now. The mist came early that evening, rolling in from the valley like a soft white tide. It didn't rush or swirl. It drifted, slow and deliberate, as though afraid to wake the town from its drowsy peace. Thomas Avery watched it from his porch for a while, the way he always did, with a mug of tea cooling in his hands. He had long stopped adding sugar. He said it ruined the honesty of the taste. When the first street lamp flickered on, Thomas stood, eased his old coat over his shoulders, and reached for the walking stick that leaned by the door. The handle was smooth from years of use, shaped by the memory of his palm. He stepped outside, locking the door behind him out of habit more than caution. In this town, nothing bad ever happened. Not anymore. Not since long before Eleanor passed. The road that led away from his home curved gently through the trees, where the air smelled of pine and damp leaves. The gravel under his shoes made a soft, rhythmic crunch, a sound that comforted him in ways he couldn't explain. It reminded him that he was still here, still moving, even if the world around him felt paused. The mist thickened as he walked, curling like silk ribbons around the lampposts, softening the hard lines of everything it touched. The world looked blurred, dreamlike, like a painting seen through a thin veil. The crickets hummed in steady harmony, their song weaving through the fog like a lullaby. Thomas adjusted the brim of his hat and smiled faintly to himself. Eleanor would have loved this, he thought. She used to say fog made the world look kinder, as though every flaw was forgiven by the softness of the air. He could almost hear her voice teasing him about his old boots, could almost feel the warmth of her arm brushing his as they walked together down this very road. It had been 8 years since she passed, though time had stopped meaning much after that. His daughter, Claire, had tried to convince him to move to the city, closer to her, closer to noise and company, but Thomas had refused. The town, the fog, the quiet, these were the last pieces of his life that still belonged to her. He couldn't leave them behind. A faint glow appeared ahead, the next street lamp breathing weakly through the haze. It was always the same: light, shadow, silence. Yet each night something subtle changed. A new sound, a shift in the wind, the way the mist caught the light like tiny stars scattered through the air. These small changes reminded him that even stillness had life in it. He passed Mrs. Callahan's house, her front porch light burning a pale amber. She always left it on, even though she'd long since moved to the nursing home. The place was empty now, but the light still glowed faithfully every night, powered by an old-timer that hadn't yet forgotten its duty. Thomas often wondered if lights could remember love, if electricity too could be loyal. The further he walked, the quieter it became. The hum of the crickets softened into distance, replaced by the whisper of his own breath. The forest leaned closer to the road, the branches heavy with dew. He inhaled deeply. The air smelled faintly of rain and earth, and something else. Something faint, almost sweet. He reached the bend where the mist grew thickest. From here, the road seemed to vanish entirely into white. It was the place where he usually stopped, turned around, and headed home. But tonight, he lingered. There was something soothing in the emptiness ahead, something that whispered for him to stay just a little longer. He tapped his cane lightly on the wet gravel and smiled. "All right, Elle," he murmured softly, his breath visible in the cool air. "Just a few more steps." And so he walked, slow, steady, disappearing into the mist, like a man walking back into a dream. The fog seemed to hum around him, a low, tender sound that wasn't quite the wind. Somewhere behind him, the street lamps flickered once, then steadied again. Thomas didn't notice. His thoughts were quiet, his heart unhurried. He didn't know why, but tonight the road felt different. Alive somehow, watchful, yet not unkind. The kind of road that didn't lead away from home, but gently back toward it. The mist grew thinner as Thomas pressed on, revealing more of the old forest path ahead, though forest was perhaps too grand a word. These were the town's pines, tall and time-worn, planted long before his birth. They stood like sentinels on either side of the road, their dark needles glistening with droplets that trembled in the faint lamplight. When the wind moved through them, they whispered, not sharply, not in warning, but softly, like old friends trading secrets they had no need to keep. Thomas always loved this part of the walk. The air here had a particular stillness, a texture almost velvet in its quiet. The world seemed to hush itself the moment he stepped between those trees, as if every sound, his breath, his heartbeat, even the gravel's crunch, was being absorbed into the earth, carried away by roots that ran deeper than memory. He sometimes imagined the road itself was listening, not in a frightening way. There was no sense of menace, no lurking dread. It was something gentler, a kind of companionship. The pines didn't talk back, but they understood. Every sorrow, every sigh he'd released into this mist over the years seemed to linger here, softened, forgiven. When the grief had been sharp, when Eleanor's pillow was still cold and her laughter still echoed through the house, this was the only place that had felt wide enough to hold his sadness without breaking under it. Now that ache had worn smooth, like sea glass, still there, but gentler to touch. He stopped by a fallen branch, brushing away dew with his cane, and glanced down the road. Beyond the bend, the fog pooled like smoke at the forest floor. He knew that a little farther down, the gravel turned to dirt, a sign that he'd gone too far, that he was nearing the part of the path most people forgot existed. Children used to take their bikes there in summer, daring one another to reach the edge of the fog, though none ever claimed to have found it. Thomas smiled faintly at the memory. The road had always had that effect. It blurred the line between what was real and what was remembered. As he resumed walking, he caught it again, a faint golden shimmer, far ahead, deep between the trees. It was no brighter than a candle flame, and far too still to be a car's headlight. He slowed, squinting. The mist wavered, folding over itself like silk being turned in slow motion. The glow remained, soft and steady, as if it had been waiting for him to notice. He'd seen it before, only rarely, and never quite in the same spot. Sometimes it hovered near the curve where the old bridge used to be, sometimes near the clearing where the wildflowers grew. He had come to think of it as the forest's heartbeat, something alive and kind, not meant to frighten, but to remind. Once, months ago, he'd tried to approach it, following the faint light until it faded into nothing. That night, when he returned home, the scent of Eleanor's favorite jasmine tea had filled the kitchen for just a moment. Faint, almost imagined, but enough to make him stop and whisper her name aloud. He never spoke of the glow to anyone. The world was already too busy dismissing quiet things. Tonight, the light pulsed once, faintly, like a sigh. Then it steadied again, resting deep within the mist. He stood there for a long while, not moving, his breath forming small ghosts in the air. The whispering pines swayed gently above him. Their branches rustled in unison, not mournfully, but with a rhythm that felt ancient and reassuring. The road seemed to hum beneath his feet, not a sound exactly, but a vibration that resonated low in his chest, where grief and comfort shared the same home. Thomas closed his eyes and listened. For a moment, he could almost believe the road was listening back. absorbing his silence, his small joys, his half-forgotten prayers. When he opened his eyes again, the golden glow was gone. Only the fog remained, patient and kind, waiting to walk him home. He turned slowly, his walking stick tapping softly against the gravel. Behind him, the trees whispered again, low, steady, and warm. It was not loneliness that followed him back through the mist that night. It was something gentler, something that almost felt like company. Thomas stopped where the pines thinned and the fog began to breathe again, stretching and folding across the road like a living thing. The air here carried a quiet pulse, a rhythm he could almost feel beneath his skin. And then, there it was, the golden glow, closer now. At first it looked like a lantern, small, round, and swaying faintly in the mist, though there was no wind to move it. Its light was soft, almost liquid, the kind that didn't cut through darkness, but rather blended with it, like honey dissolving into warm tea. It wasn't bright enough to startle, but bright enough to see by, just enough to make the world feel awake. Thomas took a few slow steps closer, careful on the uneven gravel. His cane tapped softly, steady and familiar. The lantern hung there, unmoving, suspended in the air as though cradled by the fog itself. It gave off no sound, no smell of burning oil, no shadow, only light. It should have unnerved him, but it didn't. Instead, a calmness unfurled inside him, deep and warm, as if something invisible had loosened the tightness in his chest. His heartbeat slowed. He found himself breathing easier than he had in months. The light shimmered gently, its glow folding across the mist in soft ripples. He could have sworn it pulsed in time with his breathing. Inhale, exhale, light, dark. The forest no longer whispered. It seemed to listen. Every pine stood still, each branch hushed as though bearing witness to something sacred. He didn't know how long he stood there, but when the chill began to settle into his hands, he finally took a step back. The lantern didn't fade or follow. It simply stayed, suspended, patient, watching. Thomas tipped his hat to it, feeling oddly foolish and yet respectful. "Good night, then," he murmured, "and thank you." His voice was quiet, but the sound didn't vanish. It was as if the fog absorbed it gently, folding it into itself like a promise. When he turned to head home, he noticed how light the road felt beneath his feet. The ache in his knees was still there, but softened. The pines whispered once more, a low, even sound, almost approving. By the time Thomas reached his porch, the mist had begun to lift. The night was still, clean. Stars blinked faintly above the tree line. He unlocked his door, stepped inside, and turned on the small lamp by the window. Its yellow glow filled the room with a tender kind of warmth. He made himself a cup of tea, chamomile this time, and sat by the window, staring out into the dark. The fog had cleared almost completely, leaving only the quiet outline of trees and road. But then, there it was again. A soft reflection shimmered in the glass. The same golden light. It hovered faintly in the corner of his window, not outside, but within the reflection itself. It didn't flicker like his lamp, nor move with the shadows of his room. It was steady, gentle, watching him the way it had before. Thomas leaned closer, heart steady but curious. There was no fear, only that same impossible calm. The glow seemed to breathe once, faintly, an inhale, an exhale, and then it stilled again, quiet as sleep. He smiled softly to himself, set his cup down, and whispered into the dim, "Good night, old friend." Outside, the pines stood silent. Inside, the golden reflection lingered, until the very moment he closed his eyes. The next evening, the fog rolled in earlier than usual, thick and silver, curling low across the road like a living memory. Thomas waited by his porch for a long while before starting his walk. He had told himself it was just another evening stroll, just another quiet hour before sleep. But deep down, he knew what he was hoping to find: the golden glow. He moved slowly, the tip of his cane tapping against the damp gravel, the sound softened by the mist. The world seemed smaller tonight, folded inward. Even the lampposts along the lane looked distant and uncertain, their light swallowed before it reached the next pole. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once, low and deliberate, before the forest fell quiet again. Thomas's breath mingled with the fog, and each step forward felt like a step deeper into something that remembered him. The pines whispered as they had before, soft, windless, alive. He had walked this road for years, but now it felt different, expectant. And then he saw it. The light. It hovered farther this time, just beyond the bend, bright enough to blur the outlines of the trees around it. It wasn't frightening. If anything, it looked like home, warm and patient, waiting for him to arrive. He slowed, heart steady but tender. The road's surface was slick with dew, reflecting that faint shimmer like spilled sunlight. As he drew closer, the glow seemed to recede, not fleeing, not teasing, but guiding. Always just beyond his reach. "Wait," he whispered, half smiling at himself. "I'm not as fast as I used to be." The light shimmered, pulsed once, and then steadied again, as if it had heard him. He laughed softly under his breath. "You're a strange one," he murmured. "But I suppose I've been lonely long enough to accept strange company." He took another step, and that was when he smelled it. Lavender. Faint at first, just a suggestion, a thread in the air, but unmistakable. Eleanor's scent, her favorite. His breath caught. The memory was so clear it almost hurt. Her hands arranging dried sprigs into the blue vase by their window. Her soft hum while the kettle sang. Her smile when he'd tease her for filling the house with flowers every spring. The scent deepened as he moved forward. He closed his eyes, letting it fill him, the way it used to drift through their home, through their laughter. When he opened them again, the light flickered. Once, twice, like a heartbeat skipping a beat. He whispered her name, barely audible. "Eleanor." The glow answered. It pulsed brighter, warm and alive, casting gentle waves through the mist like ripples in water. For an instant, the fog parted around it, and Thomas thought he saw something inside the glow. A silhouette, delicate and still. But before he could focus, the light dimmed again, retreating a few paces deeper into the trees. He felt no fear, only an ache. Soft, familiar, sweet as grief can be when it's touched by wonder. He followed for a few more steps, until the road curved sharply and the ground sloped down toward the unseen river. He knew better than to go farther at night. His knees were too old, the earth too slick. The lantern, if that's what it was, hovered a moment longer, then faded into the fog as though exhaling. The lavender lingered. Thomas stood there for a long time, eyes closed, hands trembling just slightly. He whispered again, "If that's you, love, thank you." When he turned back toward town, the scent followed him partway. The whispering pines swayed gently, and in their low murmur he thought he heard something almost like a voice. His wife's laughter, faint and far away, tangled in the wind. He didn't look back, not yet. But he knew, somehow, that this was only the beginning. The morning after his walk, Thomas rose earlier than usual. Sleep had come easily, deeper than it had in months, but he awoke with a strange heaviness in his chest, as if his dreams had been full of whispers he couldn't quite remember. The scent of lavender still clung faintly to his pillow. He dressed, made his coffee, and decided to head into town. It was Saturday, which meant the little general store at the corner of Main Street would be open early. He told himself he needed milk, maybe some apples. But really, he wanted to talk. He wanted to see if anyone else had ever seen what he'd seen. The bell above the shop door jingled softly as he entered. Inside, the place smelled of pine soap, old paper, and the comforting mustiness of time. Shelves leaned slightly from age, and glass jars of penny candy gleamed faintly in the morning light. Behind the counter sat Mr. Whitaker, the shopkeeper who seemed to have been old forever. His skin wrinkled like dry parchment, his eyes still sharp beneath white brows. "Well now," Whitaker said, squinting. "Thomas Avery. Haven't seen you in a while. How's the forest treating you these days?" Thomas smiled. "Peaceful, as ever. Though, last night, I saw something strange out there. A light." The old man's hands paused over the ledger. He looked up, eyes narrowing not in suspicion, but in memory. "A light, you say?" "Yes," Thomas replied. "Golden, like a lantern. Out by the old bridge path." Whitaker leaned back in his chair, letting the silence stretch. For a moment, only the faint ticking of the wall clock filled the air. Then, with a slow nod, he said, "Aye, the lantern keeper's been at it again, then." Thomas frowned. "The lantern keeper?" The old man chuckled quietly. "You've lived here your whole life, and no one's told you the story?" Thomas shook his head. "Can't say they have." Whitaker folded his arms, his voice lowering, soft as smoke. "Well, she was real once, or so they say. Lived out by the pines, near where the fog sits thickest. Back when this town was just a few dirt roads and a church steeple. They say she carried a lantern to guide travelers through the misty nights. Farmers, tradesmen, wanderers. Folks said she had the kindest heart of anyone in the valley." He paused, his gaze drifting toward the shop window. "But one night, she went out to guide a man home and never came back. Some say she lost her way in the fog. Others say she followed someone who needed her more than this world could offer. Either way, the lantern was found still burning by the roadside the next morning. No one's seen her since. Not properly, anyway." Thomas listened quietly, the story settling over him like a quilt. "You said people still see her?" "Sometimes," Whitaker said, nodding slowly. "When the mist comes early, when the air smells of rain or lavender. Always to those walking alone." Thomas's breath caught. "Lavender?" The old man smiled faintly, as if that detail pleased him. "Aye. That's how folks know it's her. The scent means she's close. My mother swore she saw her once. Said the light made her feel peaceful, like being wrapped in an old memory. The lantern keeper doesn't frighten people, mind you. She just shows up when someone's heart is too quiet for too long." The words lingered between them. Thomas felt something stir in his chest. Recognition, maybe? Or the ache of being seen. He managed a small smile. "Sounds like she finds those who've lost their way." Whitaker nodded. "That's the tale, anyway. And if she's been by your road, Thomas, maybe she thought you needed a bit of company." Thomas left the shop with his milk and apples, but didn't go straight home. Instead, he wandered to the edge of town, where the mist still lingered faintly above the pines. The morning sun caught the dew, turning it gold. He stood there for a long time, feeling the wind carry the faintest trace of lavender through the trees. Somewhere deep in the forest, a soft shimmer of light blinked once, almost like a greeting. The next evenings followed a quiet pattern, one that Thomas began to cherish more than he realized. Every night after dinner, he would slip on his old brown coat, wrap his scarf once around his neck, and step out into the misted calm. The town would already be sinking into its slow, drowsy silence. The hum of a faraway train, a single barking dog, and the steady ticking of his pocket watch against his chest. And always, at the edge of the forest, that golden shimmer waited. It had become a silent understanding between him and the light. He didn't rush toward it anymore. Instead, he walked at his own pace, letting the gravel sing beneath his boots, letting the damp air cool his face. The lantern would glimmer faintly through the veil of fog, and sometimes it seemed to sway as though greeting him. Thomas began timing his walks around it, leaving the house when he thought the light might appear. If it didn't, he'd wait a while by the bench near the curve of the road, hands folded on his cane, eyes tracing the dim outlines of the pines. There was comfort in that ritual, as though someone, or something, had decided to keep him company. He started talking to the light. Not much, just small fragments of his thoughts. The rain will come soon. Or, she used to love this kind of weather. The lantern never answered, but its flame seemed to pulse softly, as if acknowledging the words. The lavender scent would drift faintly through the mist again, faint but undeniable. One night, as he leaned against the railing of the small bridge beyond the bend, Thomas noticed something strange. The fog was thicker than usual, wrapping around him like soft wool. The lantern shone through it steadily, no longer swaying, just breathing, slow and warm. He stood there, listening to the hush between the trees, when he noticed the rhythm of the light. Flicker, pause, flicker. He frowned slightly and placed a hand on his chest. His pulse was slow, deliberate. He felt it beneath his palm, steady, familiar. Then he looked back at the light and realized the impossible truth. It was flickering in time with his heartbeat. He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking it must be a trick of exhaustion or imagination. But when he opened them again, the lantern shimmered once, twice, matching the faint tremor in his wrist. Each pulse of his heart sent a wave through the light, as though the two were tethered by something unseen. Thomas took a hesitant step forward, his breath catching. "Are you listening to me?" he whispered. The lantern swayed gently in response, its glow deepening to a soft amber. The pines whispered, their needles rustling like a quiet breath. He stood frozen, not in fear, but in a strange, expanding calm. It was as if the forest itself had leaned closer, exhaling peace. He stayed there for a long while, letting the rhythm settle between them, the beating of an old heart and the glow of an ancient light, both alive in the same quiet night. When at last he turned to go, the lantern dimmed ever so slightly, as though reluctant to let him leave. As Thomas walked home, he kept feeling that steady connection, an invisible pulse, following him just behind. When he reached his porch and turned back, the fog had cleared completely. The pines were dark silhouettes, and no lantern glowed among them. Yet deep in his chest, his heartbeat seemed slower, softer, in perfect time with a light he could no longer see. Morning light sifted through the lace curtains, painting soft gold across the wooden floorboards. Thomas sat at the kitchen table with his untouched cup of tea, steam curling lazily toward the ceiling. He'd barely slept. The image of the lantern, breathing with his own pulse, had followed him through the night like a tender ghost. After breakfast, he found himself wandering through the small, quiet house, his fingers brushing the edges of framed photographs. There she was, Margaret, smiling in the garden, her hair pinned up, eyes bright even under the pale sunlight. It had been nearly 7 years since she'd gone, yet her laughter still lingered in the walls. Sometimes, when the wind swept down from the pines, he could almost hear it. He paused before the old writing desk by the window, Margaret's desk. Its surface was neat, dusted only by time. The drawers had been closed for years. He hadn't been able to bring himself to open them since the funeral. But now, something inside him, quiet but certain, urged him forward. He eased the drawer open. A faint scent rose from within, lavender and paper. Inside were small bundles of letters tied with thin blue ribbons, the ink browned and soft from age. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the first one. The paper crackled gently under his touch. Her handwriting was exactly as he remembered. Graceful loops, steady strokes, like her voice made visible. "My dearest Thomas," it began. "If you are reading this, I hope you've walked the path tonight. You always said the forest road made you feel smaller, calmer, like the world was breathing with you. I believe there's a kind of light in that stillness, something we never lose, even when we're apart." Thomas closed his eyes. The words sank into him like rain into dry earth, the light we never lose. He whispered it aloud, the phrase trembling in the quiet air. He read another letter. "Do you remember the night the fog rolled in so thick we could barely see the road? You took my hand and said, If we walk slow enough, the mist will part for us. I think about that often. Maybe love is like that, something that leads us home, even when we can't see the way. Tears welled in his eyes before he could stop them. He pressed his fingers against the ink, smudging it slightly, as though to touch her again through the years. The ache in his chest wasn't sharp anymore. It was deep, yes, but warm. Like standing before a fireplace after a long, cold evening. He sat there for a long time, surrounded by her voice. The clock ticked softly in the corner. The pines outside whispered against the glass. Everything felt alive again. He realized that in all his walking, all his silent nights under the fog, what he'd really been searching for wasn't peace, it was her. Margaret had written about light not as something seen, but something felt. A presence that stayed, even when the world grew dim. Thomas folded the letters carefully and tied the ribbon once more. But before closing the drawer, he took one envelope and slipped it into his coat pocket. He didn't know why, only that it felt right. When he stepped outside that evening, the fog was already forming, tender and pale. He walked slowly, the letter close to his heart. Each step along the gravel road seemed to hum faintly, as though the earth itself recognized what he carried. And when the golden glow appeared ahead, swaying gently beyond the pines, he smiled through the mist. "Margaret," he whispered. "I think I understand now." The lantern flickered once, softly, like a nod, and the lavender scent filled the air. The fog had grown thicker that week, soft and low, like the earth itself was breathing in sleep. Thomas stood on his porch at dusk, the evening air cool against his cheeks. Beyond the fence, the pines whispered as they always did, their voices a gentle hush that lulled him forward. He had come to expect it now, the faint glow that pulsed between the trees, like a quiet heart calling to him. But tonight felt different. The lantern's light seemed closer. Not far away and unreachable as before, but hovering just beyond the bend in the road, golden and warm. It pulsed faintly, in rhythm with the crickets, as though the night itself was aware of its arrival. Thomas began walking, his cane tapping softly against the damp gravel. Each step stirred the mist into delicate swirls. He could hear something new, barely audible at first, a sound so faint it might have been imagined. A hum, low and melodic, drifting through the fog like a lullaby remembered from childhood. He stopped, listening. The sound came again, clearer now. A woman's voice, soft, unhurried, wordless. It wasn't a song so much as a hum wrapped in the rhythm of breathing. The melody wove itself through the pines, threading between shadows and leaves, filling the spaces where loneliness once lived. Thomas closed his eyes. The voice reminded him of Margaret, not her exact tone, but her warmth, her way of turning silence into comfort. A wave of calm settled over him. When he opened his eyes, the lantern had drawn nearer. He could see its outline now, an old iron frame swinging gently as if cradled by unseen hands. The golden light shimmered against the fog, bending around the trees, making their trunks glow like candle wax. He felt no fear, only a strange sense of being guided, as though someone, or something, was leading him home. He whispered, "Is it you?" The humming faltered, just for a moment. Then it resumed, quieter, more distant, as though retreating slightly, but the lantern remained where it was, steady and bright. Thomas stepped closer. The air thickened, fragrant with lavender again. It wrapped around him in invisible threads, soft and familiar. His pulse slowed. His breathing evened out. Each inhalation carried the scent of memory. Each exhalation, release. He remembered the letter he had tucked into his coat pocket, the one Margaret had written about, "The light we never lose." He touched it gently, feeling its folded edges beneath the fabric. The lantern flickered. For a heartbeat, the fog parted just enough for him to see a shape beside the light, a suggestion of movement, of someone standing there, her head tilted as if listening. Then the mist swallowed her again, leaving only the glow. Thomas's throat tightened. "I miss you," he whispered. The words didn't echo. They seemed to dissolve into the fog, carried by the humming voice. The melody softened. It was no longer distant. It was all around him now, close and cradling. Every pine needle seemed to vibrate with it. The sound was neither sad nor joyful. It was simply there, ancient and knowing, and... The lantern brightened once more, and for the first time, Thomas saw the road behind it illuminated clearly. The stones glistened with dew. The air shimmered faintly, as though dusted with starlight. It was a road that looked familiar, yet unreal, like the kind of path one walks in dreams. He stood there. The world hushed except for the hum. The fear that might once have crept into his heart never came. Instead, he felt a deep, inexplicable comfort, like being held by something vast and gentle. After a long while, the lantern began to drift backward into the fog, not vanishing, but retreating with purpose, as if inviting him to follow. Thomas smiled faintly. He knew he wasn't ready yet. Not tonight. As he turned to go home, the humming faded slowly into the distance, replaced by the soft patter of mist settling on leaves. When he reached his porch and looked back, the lantern was still there, small but steady, closer now than it had ever been. It flickered once, twice, almost like a good night. And though he couldn't see her, Thomas whispered, "Sleep well, my love." The fog answered with silence, but it was the kind of silence that feels alive. The next evening, the mist arrived early, thicker, denser, a pale ocean creeping between the trees. Thomas stood at the gate, coat collar turned up, watching the fog swallow the road he knew so well. The lantern's glow, faint but unwavering, pulsed in the distance like a heartbeat lost in time. He hesitated. Something in the air felt different, charged, as if the night was holding its breath. Even the crickets had gone silent. Only the sigh of the wind remained, moving through the pine needles like fingers across old piano keys. Thomas began his walk. The gravel was wet again, the scent of pine sharp and earthy. Each step echoed softly, muffled by mist. He felt the weight of the evening pressing around him, not heavy, but intimate, like the air was listening. Halfway down the road, he stopped. There it was again, the humming. But tonight it was distant, thinner, unraveling into fragments. A few notes here, a low hum there, fading before he could place its direction. He waited, hands resting on his cane, eyes scanning the wall of fog ahead. Then he heard it. A voice. "Thomas!" He froze. The name, his name, rolled softly through the mist, almost affectionate. It wasn't sharp or ghostly, not the way stories describe voices from beyond. It was tender, weary, human. He blinked, his breath catching in his chest. "Margaret?" he whispered. The fog thickened, curling tighter around the pines. The lantern's light pulsed once, twice, as if reacting to the sound. "Thomas." The voice again, clearer this time, closer. But something in its tone was wrong. There was no trace of Margaret's gentle warmth. The sound was rougher, rasped around the edges, each syllable drawn out by age. Thomas's heart began to race. He took a step forward. Depp. "Who's there?" Silence. Then the faint crunch of footsteps, slow, careful, mirroring his own. He turned sharply, scanning both sides of the road. The fog swallowed everything beyond a few feet, turning the world into a dim gray cocoon. The lantern flickered in the distance, its glow trembling, uncertain. And then, again, that voice. "Thomas." But now, he heard it clearly. The tremor, the breath between words, the slight strain of age. It was his own. His breath hitched. A chill moved through him. Not fear exactly, but recognition, like remembering something he shouldn't have forgotten. The voice came once more, softer now. echoing in perfect rhythm with the rise and fall of his own chest. "Thomas, you're almost home." He stood motionless. The sound wasn't coming from ahead. It was coming from all around him. From the mist, from the pines, from somewhere deep within. He tried to speak, but found his throat tight, his voice a mere whisper. "What are you?" The lantern flared suddenly, golden light flooding the road for a heartbeat, throwing his shadow long and thin behind him. In that instant, he saw movement. A figure in the fog, shaped like him, standing where he had been moments before. Its head tilted slightly, its face blurred by mist. Then the light dimmed again, and the figure was gone. Thomas's knees weakened. He leaned on his cane, chest rising and falling fast. The scent of lavender drifted through the air once more, soft, steadying. He closed his eyes, breathing it in, letting his pulse slow. When he opened them again, the fog had calmed. The road was silent. The lantern burned steady and still, its glow softer now, like a candle before sleep. He felt something shift inside him. Not fear, but an understanding that the voice, the echo, had not been meant to frighten him. It was a call, perhaps a reflection of his own loneliness answering itself. "Almost home," he repeated under his breath. The words felt heavy but kind, carrying both truth and comfort. He turned back toward his cottage, the glow of the lantern now dimming behind him, and whispered to the night, "I hear you." The fog thinned as he walked. The trees fell silent once more, and behind him, far down the road, the faintest echo answered, his voice, older still, fading gently into the mist. That evening, the sky had slipped into a bruised shade of indigo long before Thomas had made his way outside. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of rain yet to fall. He paused at the edge of his porch, inhaling the faintly sweet scent of wet earth and pine, expecting, as he always did, to see the soft shimmer of the lantern waiting for him beyond the bend. But there was nothing. He squinted into the gathering fog. The mist rolled across the road in thick, ghostly waves, curling over the gravel like smoke from an unseen fire. The familiar hum of crickets was absent, replaced by a deafening hush that pressed against his ears. Even the pines, usually whispering in the night wind, were eerily still. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He gripped his cane a little tighter, taking the first cautious steps onto the slick path. Each footfall was swallowed by the thick fog, crunching softly against the gravel, yet producing no response, no hint of the familiar glow ahead. Night had a new weight tonight. It wasn't quiet in the comforting sense, like a blanket tucked around the body. It was heavy and oppressive, like being trapped under a ceiling of mist with nothing to hold on to. Thomas's chest tightened. The absence of the lantern, so constant, so reliable, suddenly felt like a missing heartbeat. He walked slower, letting his senses strain against the unnatural silence. His own breathing seemed loud, exaggerated, bouncing off invisible walls of fog. The air smelled damp, metallic almost, and the lavender that had always softened the edges of his nights was gone. Only the scent of wet earth remained. He paused halfway down the road, hand resting against a pine trunk, listening for any sound, any hint of movement. Nothing. The lantern, the humming, the glow, everything had vanished. The forest felt empty, hollowed, as if the mist itself had swallowed the memory of it. "Hello?" Thomas whispered, his voice fragile in the thick air. "Is someone there?" Only silence answered, thick and suffocating. The fog swirled closer, pressing against his coat and seeping into his hair. Even the familiar curve of the road ahead seemed different, unrecognizable under the veil of gray. He felt the familiar rhythm of the lantern in his mind, its gentle pulse that had matched his heartbeat. But tonight there was no pulse, no presence, nothing but the soft echo of his own anxious breathing. He took a tentative step forward. The gravel slipped under his cane, and he steadied himself against the icy wind that cut through the mist. The world seemed to shrink around him, swallowed by the gray haze. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their trunks dark and ominous, the soft whispers of their needles gone. Fear, quiet and insidious, began to creep along the edges of his mind. Not the sharp, immediate terror of an intruder, but the creeping chill of absence, the sense that something essential, something that had guided him through countless nights, had been taken away. He stopped again, straining his eyes, searching for even a glimmer of gold in the fog. Nothing. The night stretched on, endless and unyielding. For the first time, Thomas felt the kind of loneliness that gnawed at the bones, that pulled at the very marrow of the heart. He realized he had relied on the light, on its presence, not just for comfort, but as an anchor to the world itself. Without it, he felt untethered. He wanted to call out, to demand the lantern return, but his voice caught in his throat. The muffled fog absorbed every word before it could travel beyond his lips. Finally, with a heavy sigh, Thomas turned back. The walk home was disorienting. The mist clung to him like wet cloth, muffling the sound of his own steps and bending the familiar shapes of the trees into strange, distorted figures. His cottage, when he reached it, seemed farther away than usual, dim and quiet behind the fog. He paused on the porch, looking back down the road. The lantern was nowhere to be seen. No flicker of light, no hum, no lavender to remind him of home, of memory, of love. For the first time in years, Thomas Avery felt utterly alone. The night of no light had come. Thomas stepped off the porch and into the mist, the damp chill seeping immediately through the soles of his shoes. The fog pressed close, curling around his coat and muffling the familiar sounds of the town. No crickets, no distant train whistle, no soft rustle of pines. Only the muted crunch of wet gravel beneath his boots and the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. He walked toward the bend where the lantern usually appeared, guided now not by light, but by memory. He recalled the exact curve of the road, the way the fog always pooled around the roots of the pines, the subtle slope that led down to the small bridge. Each step was a tentative mapping of the familiar through the unfamiliar, a careful tracing of what once was. The air was thick and cold, carrying the faint scent of wet leaves and pine resin. Thomas drew his scarf tighter around his neck, taking deep, deliberate breaths. Each inhale seemed to carry whispers of the past, the soft hum of the lantern, the faint lavender drifting through fog, Margaret's gentle voice. But each exhale dissipated into the nothingness, leaving him alone with the chill. He reached the old bridge. The wood was slick with moisture, and the mist swirled in eddies along its edges. He paused, listening. Every night before, the lantern had been here, steady and patient, swaying softly in the fog like a heartbeat made visible. Tonight, there was nothing. A shiver ran through him. The absence of the light was strange, unsettling, almost tangible. He moved forward slowly, hands brushing against the rail for reassurance. Somewhere in the undergrowth, a branch cracked sharply, startling him. He froze, eyes straining, heart quickening, but saw nothing. Only the fog, thick and impenetrable. His breath came in visible puffs now, and each exhale mingled with the damp air, curling like smoke before disappearing. The mist seemed to move with him, curling around ankles and knees, wrapping him in a cloak of uncertainty. Every step felt heavy, as if the fog itself resisted his progress. Thomas paused again, crouching to touch the wet leaves along the roadside. Their texture was slick, almost alien under his fingertips. Tiny droplets of water slid down his gloves as he lifted his hands to his face, wiping his brow. Even the forest seemed alive in a subtle, unsettling way. The shifting of unseen creatures, the gentle brush of something moving just beyond sight. He caught the faintest whisper of sound, a leaf brushing against another, the soft snap of twigs, but no pattern, no direction, nothing recognizable. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to remember the familiar pulse of the lantern, the warmth it always brought. In his mind, he could see the golden glow shimmering through the fog, casting gentle light across the road and trees. But each time he opened his eyes, reality refused him. The fog swallowed every trace. Minutes or hours passed, Thomas couldn't tell. Time seemed to stretch and distort. The mist pressed closer, clinging to his coat, settling in his hair. The cold seeped through his gloves, biting at his fingers. He felt a strange sensation, like being watched, though no eyes met his own. Every small sound, footsteps, rustling leaves, the wind, felt amplified, exaggerated, threatening. He whispered her name again, a fragile thread of hope. Margaret? Nothing. The lantern? Gone. Finally, Thomas sank onto the damp ground beside the path, leaning his back against a pine trunk. The cold penetrated him, and he pulled his coat tighter, wrapping himself as best he could. His mind replayed every walk, every flicker of light, every pulse that had guided him here so many nights before. Now there was nothing but the fog, the cold, and the endless uncertainty. And yet, deep within, he could feel a faint echo, a memory of warmth, of light, of the gentle hum that had always accompanied him. It was fragile, nearly lost, but it was enough to keep him moving. He stood again, taking a slow, steadying breath. The lantern was missing tonight, but Thomas Avery would not stop walking. Guided by memory alone, he pressed forward into the fog, determined to find the light, or perhaps to find himself within the shadows it had left behind. The fog had grown into a dense, living thing by the time Thomas reached the curve that led toward the lake. Each step forward felt heavier than the last, the cold seeping through his coat, chilling him to the bone. He had walked this road countless nights before, guided by the familiar glow, the humming lullaby, the pulse that mirrored his own heartbeat. Tonight, there was none of that. Only the fog, thick and unyielding, and the muffled crunch of his boots against wet gravel. It was then that he noticed them. Tiny footprints in the mud at the edge of the road. Small, delicate, and perfectly spaced. They didn't belong to any animal he recognized. He knelt to inspect them, tracing the outline with his gloved fingers. The impressions were fresh, the mud still soft around them. The footprints led forward, down the path that curved toward the lake. A shiver of unease ran through him, though it was laced with curiosity. He followed them carefully, each step echoing softly against the mist, feeling as though the forest itself held its breath. The footprints were faint but persistent, guiding him like breadcrumbs. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and pine, but there was something else. Something faint, metallic, almost like the tang of forgotten memories. The path grew quieter as he approached the lake. The usual rustle of nocturnal animals had vanished. Even the wind seemed reluctant to move. The footprints led to the water's edge, stopping abruptly. They didn't continue into the shallow waves, nor did they disappear into the reeds. They simply ended, as though whoever or whatever had left them had vanished mid-step. Thomas leaned over, peering at the mud, trying to make sense of it. He could feel the dampness creeping through his gloves, the chill biting at his hands. Then he looked down at his own feet. His heart froze. The footprints he had made in the soft gravel and mud behind him were gone, completely erased. Not a single mark remained where he had stepped. The fog lay over the path like a blanket, smooth and undisturbed, as if he had floated forward rather than walked. A tremor of disbelief passed through him. He bent closer, tapping the ground with his cane. The mud yielded to its touch, yet no trace of his passage remained. It was as though the night itself had swallowed him whole, erasing every record of his movement. He stood abruptly, the sound of his own breathing loud in his ears. The lake stretched before him, silvered by the pale fog, motionless except for the faint ripple of water against the shore. The lantern, his constant companion for so many nights, was nowhere in sight. The air was still, save for the gentle lapping of waves against stones. And then he heard it, a faint whisper carried across the water. Not Margaret's voice, not the hum of the lantern, but a soft trembling sound. His own voice, calling his name. Thomas. The sound echoed in the fog, distorted, ethereal, as though coming from both behind and within him. He turned slowly, scanning the mist, but the path behind remained smooth, untouched. His mind reeled, struggling to reconcile what he saw with what he felt. Footsteps erased. Voice returned. Light absent. Thomas's pulse raced, but beneath the fear, a strange, surreal calm began to settle over him. He realized that the night, the fog, the missing lantern, perhaps it was not meant to frighten him. Perhaps it was a reminder that he was walking a path both known and unknown, one that required trust in the unseen, in the memories, in the heart that continued to beat even when no trace remained. He knelt briefly on the water's edge, touching the cold surface, letting it ripple through his fingers. The tiny footprints were gone now too, leaving only the smooth mud reflecting the mist above. Yet somehow Thomas did not feel entirely lost. He could feel the pulse of the night, the rhythm of the road, the quiet insistence of something waiting just ahead. With a deep breath, he stood. The lantern might be gone. His footprints might have vanished. But Thomas Avery, guided by memory and the quiet whisper of his own heart, took a slow, deliberate step forward into the fog, toward whatever awaited at the far edge of the lake. Thomas had walked farther than he ever remembered that night. The fog had thickened into a pale curtain, so dense it blurred the edges of the world, and yet he felt compelled to follow. Each step seemed to echo into infinity, the gravel beneath his boots muffled, his breath rising in soft clouds. He was no longer guided by the familiar pull of the lantern. Instead, he moved by instinct, a thread of memory and longing leading him forward. And then he saw her. She stood at the bend of the lake, framed by the mist, carrying a lantern that glowed faintly at first but grew brighter with every step Thomas took. The light was unlike anything he had seen before, soft yet radiant, shimmering like starlight trapped inside glass. It cast a gentle glow on the fog, turning the air around her into a halo of silver and gold. The woman wore a long gray coat, its fabric flowing as if caught in a breeze that Thomas could not feel. A veil of mist hung around her, like smoke from a distant fire, swirling gently with her movements. Her hands were delicate and steady as they held the lantern. And though her figure was slender and bent slightly with age, there was a quiet authority in the way she carried herself. Thomas froze, unsure whether to approach or remain rooted in the shadows. The air was thick with tension, not the kind that made the hair on your neck stand up in fear, but a different sort of tension, the kind that tightens the chest, makes the heart race, yet beckons you forward with irresistible curiosity. Her face, when he finally saw it, struck him in a way he could not articulate. It was both strange and familiar, as though he had seen it in dreams or in the edges of memory, yet could not place when or where. Deep lines etched her skin, telling stories of countless nights spent wandering paths like this one, but her eyes held a luminous warmth, the kind of quiet understanding that seemed to peer directly into the soul. The lantern's glow reflected in her eyes, making them appear almost liquid. And Thomas felt a strange pull, part fear, part awe, part recognition. He thought he heard a faint hum emanating from the lantern, a sound so soft it could have been the vibration of the night itself. "Thomas Avery," she said softly, her voice carrying through the mist like wind over still water. It was older than he expected, yet comforting, like a memory he had forgotten he had. He wanted to speak, to ask who she was, what she wanted, why she had appeared here. But the words lodged in his throat. Instead, he took a cautious step forward. The fog swirled around her feet, and he noticed something remarkable. The lantern did not touch the mist. Instead, it seemed to float above it, illuminating her path without disturbing the delicate folds of fog beneath. She did not move toward him, nor did she retreat. She simply stood there, watching, waiting, the lantern swinging ever so slightly in her hands. The light pulsed gently, almost in time with his own heartbeat, and Thomas realized that the fear he had felt during the night of no light, the erased footprints, and the vanishing lanterns, all paled against this moment. He felt drawn to her, as if some invisible thread tied him to the glow, to her presence. And yet, A flicker of caution remained, whispering that appearances could be deceiving, that the world was not always what it seemed under the veil of mist. Are you the lantern keeper? He asked finally, his voice trembling with a mixture of hope and reverence. The woman's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she lifted the lantern slightly, and the glow shifted, casting intricate patterns across the fog. Patterns that seemed almost alive, moving with a rhythm Thomas could feel deep in his chest. Then she spoke, softly. Almost a whisper carried on the mist itself. I am here for those who are lost, Thomas. Those who walk without a light, yet still seek the path home. A wave of calm washed over him, and at the same time, a chill raced down his spine. Her presence was comforting, yes, but it carried a weight, a sense of eternity, of knowledge he could not yet understand. He wanted to step closer, to reach out, to ask countless questions. But the mist seemed to pulse with her, breathing around him, reminding him that some encounters were meant to be savored slowly, with patience and care. And so he stood, rooted in place, gazing at the woman in the veil of mist, the lantern that glowed like starlight between them, feeling the blend of awe, fear, and recognition. The first real encounter with the unknown that had been waiting for him all along. Thomas took a hesitant step closer, the damp gravel crunching softly beneath his boots. The lantern's glow washed over him, warm yet ethereal, casting long shadows that twisted through the mist like smoke. The woman's figure remained still, yet the aura around her hummed with quiet energy. You kept the path alive, she said softly, her voice threading through the fog like a gentle breeze. There was no accusation in it, only observation, an acknowledgement that seemed to pierce straight through Thomas's defenses. Her words wrapped around him like a familiar melody, soothing yet stirring something deep within. Thomas's breath caught. I didn't know I was keeping it alive, he murmured. His hands tightened around the cane. He had walked this road countless nights, seeking solace, seeking memory, seeking her. But he hadn't realized that his quiet persistence, his nightly presence, had been a kind of caretaking, a silent devotion to the lantern, the fog, the memory of the path itself. The woman tilted her head, the mist shifting around her, revealing glimpses of her face. Thomas froze. The features, soft lines, the curve of her mouth, the depth in her eyes, struck a chord in his heart. She looked like Margaret. Older, yes, older than she had been in life, as if time had continued for her somewhere he could not reach, and yet every familiar detail was there. The warmth of her smile, the gentle furrow of her brow, the quiet wisdom in her gaze. It was all Margaret, and yet not. He stumbled back a step, fear and wonder mingling. Margaret? His voice was barely a whisper. The woman's eyes softened. Not exactly, she said. I am what remains, what endures. A reflection of what could have been. Her words floated across the mist, slow and deliberate, carrying both comfort and a strange melancholy. You walked, and you remembered. You kept the road alive, and in doing so, you brought me back, even if only for tonight. Thomas's chest tightened. A lump rose in his throat. The air between them seemed charged, heavy with memory and possibility. He wanted to run to her, to touch her, to confirm she was real, yet a part of him hesitated. There was a boundary here, thin as fog, that he could not cross. She stepped forward, the lantern swaying gently, its light reflecting in her eyes. Thomas felt as though he were peering into another world, a parallel thread of time where Margaret had lived longer, walked further, and aged into the figure before him. His mind raced. What had this meant all along? The lantern, the mist, the erased footprints? They had led him here, to this moment of recognition, of understanding. You see me because you never gave up, the woman continued, voice soft but steady. Because you believed, even in the absence of light, that someone or something was waiting. She extended a hand, palm open, and the lantern's glow seemed to respond, brightening ever so slightly. Thomas swallowed hard, feeling tears well in his eyes. I kept walking because I missed you. Always. His voice trembled with the weight of years, of loss, of longing unspoken. The woman nodded, a knowing expression in her gaze. And because of that, you have discovered that love endures in ways the heart cannot always measure. Not just in memory, but in action, in presence, in persistence. The fog swirled around them, soft and enveloping, carrying the faint scent of lavender that had always lingered near Margaret. Thomas felt a warmth spread through him, a mixture of awe, sorrow, and comfort. He realized that the fear and uncertainty of the night, the loneliness and the missing light, had all been leading him to this understanding. For a long moment, they simply regarded each other. Thomas saw not just the woman before him, but the reflection of love, of memory, and of the life that might have been. The lantern's glow flickered gently, mirroring the quiet pulse of his heart, as though confirming that the path, once dark, once uncertain, was now alive with recognition and meaning. And in that misty stillness, Thomas Avery understood. He was not alone. Not really. The road had always been waiting, the lantern always flickering, and love, shaped by memory and devotion, had found its way back, soft and enduring, through the veil of night. Thomas stood frozen, gazing at the woman in the veil of mist. The lantern she carried pulsed softly, a starlight glow that seemed to breathe in harmony with his own heartbeat. He felt as if the world had narrowed to this single point, the glow, the mist, the presence that felt so achingly familiar. The fog swirled gently around them, moving in rhythm with the lantern's light, creating a delicate dance of shadow and luminescence. Then, almost imperceptibly, the glow began to shift. It drew closer, a slow merging of light, until Thomas could no longer distinguish the edges of her lantern from the soft glow emanating from his own hands. The warmth radiated up his arms, gentle and tender, and he realized with a pang of wonder that he was holding both the memory of the lantern and the essence of the woman before him. The woman's eyes met his, filled with a depth of understanding that made his chest ache. "You've carried this all along," she said softly, her voice like the whisper of leaves brushing over still water. Not just the lantern, but the memory, the devotion, the love. Thomas blinked, and in that instant, the impossible happened. The figure before him seemed to dissolve, the mist folding in on itself, and the woman faded like morning dew under the first touch of sunlight. Her presence lingered only as a shimmer in the fog, delicate and fleeting, and then she was gone. For a heartbeat, Thomas felt a hollow absence, the quiet ache of loss that had once defined his nights. And then he looked down. The lantern, once hers, rested fully in his hands. Its light was soft, warm, and steady, pulsing gently with a life of its own. The glow emanated from within him as much as it emanated from the lantern itself, and he could feel it responding to the rhythm of his heartbeat, a tender confirmation that the path, the light, and the memory had not disappeared. They had become a part of him. He lifted the lantern slightly, letting the glow illuminate the foggy path ahead. The world looked the same, yet everything had changed. Shadows danced softly across the mist, no longer menacing but intimate, alive with quiet beauty. Every ripple of fog, every curve of the road, seemed infused with a gentle, luminous rhythm. Thomas's mind wandered back over the nights he had walked these paths alone. The erased footprints, the missing glow, the faint whispers of a voice not his own. It all made sense now. Each moment of uncertainty, each step into darkness, had led him here, to the convergence of memory and presence. The lantern was no longer just a guide. It was a bridge between past and present, between longing and comfort, between fear and healing. He moved forward slowly, feeling the warmth radiate up his arms, through his chest, anchoring him in the world even as the fog swirled around him. The lake reflected the lantern's glow like liquid gold, casting gentle waves across the mist, and Thomas felt an almost childlike wonder stirring in his chest. The night no longer held the cold weight of absence. It held possibility, tenderness, and the quiet knowledge that love endures in forms beyond understanding. And then, a new sound reached him, a soft rustle among the pines, a gentle breeze, almost like a sigh. The memory of the woman lingered in the fog, delicate and faint, reminding him that though she had faded, the essence of her presence remained in the light, in the path, and in his heart. Thomas paused, letting the lantern's warmth wash over him. He realized that he did not need to see her to feel her. The light was enough. The path was enough. The quiet persistence of his love, his memory, and his devotion had transformed the night itself. The fog, once oppressive and alien, now cradled him with the soft hush of comfort and healing. A faint smile crossed his face, the first in many nights, as he lifted the lantern higher, casting its glow further along the winding road. He walked on, each step deliberate, each breath steady, feeling the pulse of warmth in his hands and the gentle guidance of the light within. And in that moment, Thomas Avery understood the final truth of the road, the lantern, and the woman in the veil of mist. That love, memory, and devotion are never truly lost. They may vanish from sight, shift form, or merge into another, but they endure. They transform. And sometimes, in the quiet hush of night, they return. Not as they were, but as something gentle, warm, and eternal. The lantern pulsed softly in his hands, a heartbeat of light in the mist. Thomas continued forward, the fog curling gently around him, carrying whispers of the past and promise of the path ahead. The night was alive with quiet magic, and he was no longer alone. The light was his, the road was his, and he finally felt at peace. Thomas returned home with the lantern cradled carefully in his hands. Its glow filled the small living room with a soft, golden radiance, warm and comforting. The fog outside had thinned into a gentle mist settling over the town, but inside the light felt alive, as though it carried its own pulse, synchronized with his heartbeat. He placed the lantern on the table and stared at it, mesmerized. He raised a trembling hand and brushed his fingers against the lantern's cool glass. The moment he touched it, the glow shifted, expanding outward in gentle waves, casting shapes and shadows that seemed to move independently of the lamp itself. A familiar scent of lavender filled the air, Margaret's favorite, and with it came the faintest sound of her voice, humming a tune he had not heard in decades. Then the memories began. The first scene unfolded on the wall, a soft projection of light and mist. Margaret laughing in the kitchen, the morning sun streaming across her hair as she poured tea. Thomas's heart clenched. The details were vivid, more real than any photograph, more intimate than any recollection. He could hear the clink of the china, the hum of the kettle, even the subtle scrape of her chair against the wooden floor. Tears pooled in his eyes, and yet he felt no sadness, only a profound tenderness, a gentle reminder that these moments, though past, had never truly left him. He reached out instinctively, as if to touch her shoulder, but his hand passed through the image like fog. The scene shimmered, transforming smoothly into the next. A summer afternoon in the garden, Margaret kneeling beside the roses, sunlight catching the dew on the petals. The wind carried the faint rustle of leaves, and he could almost feel her hands in the soil, delicate yet strong. He closed his eyes, letting the memory wash over him, filling the hollow ache he had carried since her passing. Another scene appeared, more intimate. A quiet evening by the fireplace, Thomas reading aloud from a worn book while Margaret rested her head on his shoulder. The firelight flickered across their faces, soft shadows dancing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He could almost feel the warmth of her breath, the gentle rise and fall of her chest against his own. Thomas realized that the lantern did more than illuminate the room. It illuminated memory itself. It projected fragments of the life they had shared, capturing not just images, but sensations, sounds, and emotions. The past was alive again, delicate and vivid, yet entirely safe within the soft glow. He lingered on each scene, allowing the lantern to guide him through years of love, quiet moments, and small joys. It was not just a tool for remembrance, it was a bridge, connecting him to the essence of Margaret, the laughter and light that had once filled his life. And through it, he felt something profound, a gentle understanding that, even though she was gone, the love they had shared had never truly disappeared. The glow pulsed softly, synchronizing with his breath, and Thomas felt a warmth spreading from his chest outward, the loneliness of decades melting into the light. He whispered her name into the quiet room, and the lantern seemed to respond, its glow intensifying for a heartbeat as if acknowledging his devotion. For the first time in many years, Thomas allowed himself to feel wholly present, not lost in grief, not wandering through fog, but seated firmly in the glow of memory, of love, and of a quiet, enduring connection. The lantern did not merely remind him of what was lost. It showed him what remained, eternal and unbroken, waiting patiently in the soft light for him to rediscover it. And in that glow, Thomas Avery found more than comfort. He found peace. The next morning, Thomas felt a quiet determination. The lantern's glow from the night before still lingered in his mind, its warmth resonating in his chest like a heartbeat of memory. He knew he needed to understand more about the light, about the woman in the mist, and about the path that had guided him so relentlessly. He returned to the pine grove, the gravel crunching softly beneath his boots, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and evergreen. The fog had not fully lifted, curling around the tree trunks like silver silk. Something urged him forward, deeper into the grove, past familiar bends of the road, toward a clearing he had only glimpsed in the faint glow of previous nights. There, partially hidden beneath a gnarled root and a thick layer of moss, he discovered a weathered leather journal. Its edges were frayed, the pages yellowed with age, and the leather cover smelled faintly of pine resin and thyme. Thomas knelt and picked it up carefully, brushing off debris, his fingers trembling slightly. The journal felt alive in his hands, as if it had been waiting for him all along. He opened the first page, and the handwriting leapt off the paper. Careful, flowing script, elegant yet precise. The words immediately drew him in. To those who wander alone, this light is for you. I am the lantern keeper. For years I have walked these paths, guiding souls who cannot find their way, who carry grief like a shadow they cannot shake. The lantern is not merely light. It is memory, warmth, and hope made tangible. To see it is to remember. To remember is to heal. Thomas's breath caught. He read on, page after page, each entry detailing nights much like his own. Fog thick enough to swallow footsteps, travelers lost in sorrow, echoes of voices long gone, and always the lantern leading them gently forward. The keeper wrote of watching the lonely follow the glow, of witnessing tears dry in the soft warmth of its light, of hearts quieting, of peace slowly returning. As Thomas read, the pieces fell into place. The golden lantern that had appeared in the mist, the voice that echoed his own, the erased footprints. They were not sinister or malevolent. They were deliberate, tenderly crafted experiences designed to guide, to soothe, to restore. The keeper's journal revealed the purpose behind every mystery, every flicker of light, every inexplicable sensation that had haunted his nights. A particular entry made his heart ache with recognition. Sometimes the lost see themselves in the reflection of the lantern. They see what could have been, or what still can be, through the lives they have touched and the love they have carried. The lantern does not haunt, it heals. It does not chase, it embraces. It waits, patient and eternal, for the heart ready to receive it. Thomas set the journal on his knees, tears stinging his eyes. He thought of Margaret, of the decades they had shared, of the nights of quiet longing he had endured since her passing. He realized, finally, that the lantern had never been a ghost of fear. It had been a beacon of healing, a mirror for his grief, and a guide toward the peace he had long sought but never allowed himself to fully accept. The wind whispered through the pines, rustling the needles softly. The scent of lavender carried faintly from nowhere, wrapping around him like a memory brought to life. Thomas felt a gentle warmth in his chest, the kind that spreads quietly through the bones and settles the mind. He looked down at the lantern in his hands, still softly glowing, and understood. The light had not abandoned him. It had been with him all along, waiting for him to recognize its purpose. The keeper's journal, the path, the lantern, they were part of the same truth. Grief was not a prison, nor was memory a burden. They were instruments of connection, capable of bringing comfort, guidance, and gentle illumination in the darkest of nights. Thomas rose slowly, feeling the warmth of the lantern extend into him, merging with the soft ache of remembrance. He folded the journal carefully, tucking it under his arm. The forest around him felt different now, less mysterious, less intimidating, yet more alive, resonating with the soft pulse of unseen guidance. He realized then that he had been given more than a lantern, more than a path through fog. He had been given understanding, reassurance, and a way to transform his grief into gentle strength. And as he stepped back onto the familiar road, the soft crunch of gravel beneath his boots seemed to echo the rhythm of the lantern's glow. Patient, enduring, and full of quiet, luminous hope. Thomas stood at the edge of the clearing, the lantern's warm glow cradled gently in his hands. The fog hung thick around him, soft and undulating, like waves frozen mid-motion. From the depths of the mist, a subtle shift occurred. A presence he had felt before, comforting, yet ineffable. The woman in the veil of mist, or perhaps the essence of her, appeared again, her lantern hovering just above the ground, glowing like a pulse of starlight. "You've walked far, Thomas," a soft voice whispered, mingling with the rustle of pine needles. "You have kept the path alive, and now the choice is yours." He felt a gentle tug in his chest, as though the very air around him carried both invitation and challenge. The lantern's glow expanded slightly, painting the mist in soft gold and silver hues. Within it, he glimpsed visions, not just of the past, but of what lay beyond. A quiet, endless light, serene and eternal, where grief and longing melted into pure presence. He could step forward and join it, leaving the heaviness of the world behind, or he could return to life, carrying the lantern and guiding others as the keeper had done before. Thomas's hands tightened around the lantern. The warmth radiating from it seemed to seep into his very bones, and memories of Margaret danced before him, her laughter in the morning sun, the touch of her hand brushing against his, the quiet evenings by the fireplace. He realized that the lantern was more than a memory. It was a choice, a bridge between sorrow and purpose, between the pull of eternal peace and the responsibility of living. "Do I stay?" he whispered, voice trembling. "Or continue walking?" The lantern pulsed in response, gently, almost in time with his heartbeat. The mist swirled as though waiting for his answer, holding its breath. The visions expanded again, showing him not just what could be if he stepped forward, but also the impact he could have if he returned. Faces of those lost, lonely, and wandering in quiet despair appeared. People who could find solace if he carried the light further. A tear slid down Thomas's cheek. The choice was not easy. He felt the pull of the serene, unending glow beyond, promising comfort, the end of pain, the eternal warmth of reunion with Margaret. And yet, the other path called to him differently, not with promises of peace, but with purpose, with action, with love extended outward rather than inward. He looked down at the lantern in his hands, the light soft, steady, and alive. I will stay," he said finally. His voice was firm, resolute, yet full of tenderness. "I will stay here, in this world, to keep the path alive for others, to carry this light forward." The mist thickened briefly, and for a heartbeat, Thomas felt a pull, a sensation as though the ground beneath him had shifted, the air vibrating with quiet energy. He closed his eyes, expecting the gentle surrender of stepping into the eternal glow. But when he opened them, he was still here. The clearing was the same, the fog curling softly around the pines. The lantern rested warmly in his hands, glowing gently, alive with the same soft pulse as before. The weight of grief had softened, replaced by purpose and clarity. The choice had been made, yet the gift of the light remained with him. Tangible, luminous, and real. Thomas inhaled deeply, letting the cool air fill his lungs, and the warmth of the lantern spread through his chest. He understood, with sudden certainty, that he had not refused peace. He had embraced it differently. He would walk forward, carrying the lantern, guiding those who wandered in sorrow, just as the keeper had done. A faint breeze rustled the pines, carrying the scent of lavender and the whisper of distant laughter. The night seemed alive with possibility, the path ahead soft and luminous. Thomas Avery stepped forward, the lantern casting a gentle halo around him, illuminating the misty road, ready to lead, to heal, and to carry the quiet, enduring light of love through the darkness of the world. Thomas Avery approached the edge of the familiar road just as twilight draped its soft indigo veil across the sky. The lantern, warm and luminous in his hands, seemed to hum with a gentle life of its own. He had walked this path countless nights, but tonight was different. Tonight, he carried not only the memories of Margaret and the guidance of the lantern keeper, but also a newfound purpose, a mission to share the light with others who wandered in sorrow and solitude. He knelt beside the gravel path, carefully setting the lantern on a weathered wooden post near the grove. Its glow spread outward like a small sun, soft yet radiant, painting the mist in delicate golden hues. The scent of lavender wafted faintly from the lantern, filling the night air with gentle warmth. For a moment, Thomas lingered in the hush of the evening, listening to the symphony of crickets, the distant rush of the creek, and the subtle whisper of wind through pine needles. Every detail of the night felt magnified. The shimmer of dew on the grass, the soft curl of fog around tree trunks, the glint of moonlight dancing across the water. The road seemed to recognize him, its familiar bends and hidden clearings welcoming him as if he had returned home. He straightened slowly, feeling the warmth of the lantern extend through him, anchoring him in the present while connecting him to the past. He realized, as he watched the lantern's steady pulse, that this was more than guidance for the lonely. It was a symbol of enduring love, of remembrance, of the quiet persistence of hope. Every flicker carried the essence of Margaret, of the keeper, of every step he had taken along this path. The light was no longer a solitary comfort. It was a beacon for all who might stumble into grief, uncertainty, or fear. As the night deepened, Thomas felt a subtle vibration in the air, a recognition almost, that the path itself had been waiting for this moment. He thought of the countless lonely souls who might one day walk here, lost in the fog, aching for connection, for warmth, for a sign that they were not alone. The lantern would be their guide, just as it had been his, offering gentle reassurance with its golden glow. He lingered, watching the light sway softly in the evening breeze, and a profound peace settled over him. It was a calm born not of solitude, but of understanding, that grief and memory, love and loss, could coexist within the same space, and that by embracing both, one could illuminate the way forward. The glow seemed to respond to his presence, pulsing ever so slightly in time with his heartbeat. Thomas smiled through the quiet tears that had begun to fall, feeling a warmth that transcended the cold of night or the ache of absence. The light was alive, eternal in its purpose, waiting patiently for the footsteps of those who needed it most. He stepped back, giving the lantern space to shine, its radiance expanding into the foggy night. The mist curled around it, embracing it like a guardian, and Thomas felt a gentle satisfaction settle deep in his chest. He knew that when he returned home, he would carry with him the same peace, the same steady assurance, and the knowledge that the path had become more than a road. It had become a sanctuary. For the first time in decades, Thomas Avery felt fully at rest. The lantern's light flickered softly, casting warm halos across the road, the trees, and the misty expanse ahead. Each pulse of the glow seemed to whisper the same message: love endures, memory guides, and hope, even in its quietest form, can transform the night into something luminous. He lingered for a few more moments, allowing the serenity of the scene to sink into his bones before turning slowly toward home. The path behind him shimmered faintly, a trail of golden light that would remain for any wanderer brave enough to seek it. And as he walked, Thomas felt a gentle certainty that the lantern, the light, and the love it represented would continue to guide, to heal, and to comfort long after he himself had vanished into the embrace of night. The road was quiet, yet alive. The fog was thick, yet comforting, and in the glow of the lantern, Thomas Avery discovered not only the return of the light, but the return of himself, to hope, to purpose, and to lasting peace. That night, a sudden storm rolled over the town. Dark clouds swallowed the moon, and wind whipped through the streets, rattling windows and bending the trees near Thomas's house. Rain fell in sheets, drumming on rooftops and the gravel path outside, turning the familiar road into a blur of gray and silver. Thunder rumbled in the distance, shaking the air with deep, resonant growls. The town's power flickered and died, plunging homes into darkness. Street lamps sputtered out, leaving only shadows and the relentless roar of the storm. But in the middle of the fogged road, Thomas's lantern burned steadily, a beacon of soft, unwavering light. Its golden glow cut through the tempest, gentle yet commanding, warm against the cold, wet night. At first, Thomas thought he would be alone in the storm, just as he had walked alone in years past. But soon, he noticed figures emerging through the sheets of rain. Neighbors, some clutching blankets, others guiding children or pets. They were drawn as if by instinct, seeking warmth and a sense of safety. They arrived silently, eyes wide with wonder at the glowing lantern. The storm seemed to hush in the presence of the light. Its fury softened at the edges where the lantern's glow spread. People gathered near the lantern, finding comfort in its steady pulse. The glow reflected on their wet faces, highlighting eyes that had carried worry, exhaustion, or grief. Some whispered quietly to each other, sharing small reassurances. Some simply stood, shoulders relaxed, letting the warmth seep into their bodies and hearts. The lantern seemed to respond to them, its light pulsing gently as if recognizing each individual, offering solace without words. Thomas watched quietly, feeling the same warmth he had felt when holding the lantern himself. The storm continued outside, but in that small circle of golden light, there was peace. Children laughed softly, chasing reflections of light on puddles, while the elderly clasped hands, comforted by the unexpected sanctuary. Strangers shared blankets, smiles, and whispered stories. The lantern did more than illuminate the night. It healed, not in grand gestures, but in subtle, quiet ways. Shoulders relaxed, breathing slowed, hearts felt lighter. Memories of loss, worry, and fatigue seemed to fade, if only a little, under the gentle radiance. The storm was fierce, but the lantern's warmth was fiercer still, holding steady like a pulse against the chaos. Thomas realized that the light he had carried all this time, the one that had guided him through grief, through fog, through memory, was now guiding others as well. The lantern, once a private comfort, had become a shared refuge. Its glow was a balm, its warmth a gentle reminder that even in the darkest nights, there is illumination for those who seek it. As the storm raged on, Thomas stayed near the lantern, watching the neighbors gather, laugh softly, and draw courage from its glow. Each flicker reflected hope. Each ripple of light carried reassurance. He understood now that the light was never just his. It belonged to the road, to the town, and to anyone lost or weary enough to follow it. Hours passed, but the lantern never faltered. Finally, the storm began to ease. Rain slowed to a drizzle, and wind softened to a whisper. Neighbors lingered for a while longer, reluctant to leave the warmth behind. When they finally returned to their homes, their faces carried a subtle glow, a quiet sense of renewal, unaware of the full magic they had witnessed. yet unmistakably touched by it. Thomas looked down at the lantern, still glowing softly in his hands. He smiled through the raindrops on his face, a deep, knowing smile. The storm had passed, but its lesson remained. Light, warmth, and love, even in small forms, could reach beyond grief, fear, and darkness. And in the heart of the night, the lantern continued to burn, steadfast and gentle, a living testament to hope, healing, and the quiet magic of a guiding light. Morning arrived quietly, the kind of soft, golden light that seeped through curtains without fanfare. Birds called gently from the trees, dew clung to the grass like scattered diamonds, and the air smelled faintly of lavender and wet earth. But Thomas Avery did not stir. His neighbors found him later, peacefully resting in his favorite armchair, the lantern glowing softly on the table beside him. Its light bathed the room in a warm, golden hue, untouched by sorrow or loss. The glow seemed almost to pulse gently, a heartbeat in the quiet stillness. There was no panic, no grief that overpowered the room, only a serene hush, as if the house itself were honoring the passage of a life fully lived. The town mourned Thomas in gentle waves. People whispered about his nightly walks, about the lantern and the glow that had comforted so many during storms, fog, and lonely nights. They spoke of the warmth it radiated, of how it had eased worry, quieted sorrow, and brought a sense of calm and safety. Yet no one could explain how the light remained, unwavering, after Thomas had gone. Weeks passed. The lantern stayed lit on the road, perched upon its wooden post near the pine grove. Travelers who wandered along the misted path during evening walks began to speak of something extraordinary. Some claimed to glimpse a figure walking beside the lantern, a man with gentle eyes and a calm, knowing presence. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost tender. He seemed to guide the lost, the lonely, the weary, ensuring that each step found solid ground. "It's him," whispered one traveler, eyes wide with wonder. "The man from the stories. He's still here, walking with the light." Another recounted seeing the figure pause, extending a hand, as if offering reassurance, before continuing beside the glowing lantern. The mist swirled around him, soft and protective, and the lantern's light seemed to bend toward his presence, shimmering in time with an unseen heartbeat. Travelers felt comfort they could not explain, a deep sense of being seen, of being guided, of not being alone. Thomas Avery, it seemed, had become part of the light itself. Not as a shadow, not as a ghost of fear, but as a gentle guardian, carrying forward the purpose he had chosen in his final conscious moments. The path he had walked, the lantern he had tended, the quiet courage he had offered, all became a living, luminous testament to his life and to the enduring power of kindness and memory. The townspeople began to leave small offerings near the lantern, a cup of tea, a sprig of lavender, a note of gratitude. Some walked the path themselves, hoping to glimpse the man with gentle eyes, seeking reassurance in his silent, tender guidance. And invariably, the light pulsed brighter, as if acknowledging each presence, each step, each heartbeat along the fogged road. Even the fog seemed gentler now, curling around the lantern in a protective embrace. The whispers of pine needles, the rustle of leaves, the faint hum of crickets, they all blended into a quiet symphony, harmonizing with the soft, eternal glow. Travelers spoke of warmth radiating not just from the lantern, but from the very air, a subtle, soothing comfort that seeped into bones and hearts alike. In the stillness of night, beneath the stars, the path became more than a road. It became a sanctuary. The lantern's glow, carried by Thomas Avery's presence, bridged the world of the living and the echoes of memory, a gentle reminder that love, guidance, and compassion do not end with a single life. They endure, patiently, softly, shining like quiet gold against the dark. And so, the story continued. Travelers found their way home, hearts lighter, steps steadier, guided by a man with gentle eyes who walked beside a lantern that never dimmed. In every flicker, every golden pulse, there was Thomas Avery. Peaceful, serene, eternal. His farewell was not an end, but a beginning. A lasting legacy of light, healing, and hope, shining softly for all who wandered in darkness, waiting for them to follow.